Imagine your sister calling you selfish for closing on a $5.7 million condo while she has survived on our parents' money for years. My entire family stared at me as if my success was a community asset I had stolen. Weeks later, after a humiliating firing, she demanded I hire her. I had the power to say no, but instead, I decided to help her in a way none of them would ever forget. My name is Brinley Hamilton, and if I had known that a single sentence about real estate would detonate my family dynamic like a landmine under the dining table, I might have waited until dessert to say it, or perhaps I would have said it sooner, just to watch the explosion happen before the turkey was even carved. It was Thanksgiving in Willow Ridge, North Carolina, a town that always smelled like pine needles and wood smoke this time of year. We were gathered in the dining room of the house I grew up in, a space that felt smaller every time I returned. The air was thick with the savory scent of roasted bird, sage stuffing, and the heavy, cloying perfume my Aunt Carol always wore. There were 12 of us squeezed around the extended oak table. My parents, Linda and Martin, sat at opposite ends like monarchs presiding over a slightly dysfunction kingdom. My sister, Hazel, was seated directly across from me. At 33 years old, I had spent the last decade carefully constructing a life that looked nothing like the one inside this room. As the senior acquisitions director at Harborstone Crest Developments, I lived in a world of high-stakes negotiations, steel and glass boardrooms, and decisions that reshaped skylines. Here, however, I was just Brinley, the daughter who worked too much and visited too little. The conversation had hit a lull. The only sounds were the scraping of silverware against china and the soft clinking of wine glasses. I took a sip of the Pinot Noir I had brought, a bottle that cost more than the entire spread on the table. Though I had removed the price tag to avoid comments and decided to share my news, I did not say it with malice. I did not say it to gloat. I said it because, in my naive mind, families were supposed to be happy when one of their own succeeded. Actually, I have some big news, I said, setting my glass down. I kept my voice level, casual. I finally closed on that property I have been looking at, the condo in Solana Bay. I got it for $5.7 million. It has a wraparound balcony looking straight out at the ocean. I reached for a dinner roll, expecting a round of congratulations, maybe a good for you, honey from Mom, or a nod of approval from Dad. Instead, the room went dead silent. It was not the silence of awe. It was the silence of a vacuum sealing shut, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. My Aunt Carol froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. My cousin lowered his beer. Then came the crash. Hazel, my 30-year-old sister, slammed her silverware down onto her plate. The porcelain rattled violently against the table. I looked up, startled. Hazel was trembling. Her face, usually carefully made up to hide the fatigue of her chaotic lifestyle, was flushing a deep, angry crimson. "You are unbelievable," Hazel whispered, though in the quiet room, it sounded like a scream. "Excuse me?" I asked, confused. $5.7 million, she repeated, emphasizing every syllable as if the number were an obscenity. Her eyes filled with sudden, hot tears. "You stand there and talk about buying a condo for nearly $6 million while I'm sitting here wondering how I'm going to pay my phone bill next month. Hazel, I didn't—" "You were born to help me," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You are my big sister. You were born to help me, not to buy castles for yourself." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and toxic. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to correct her. I waited for my father to tell her to lower her voice, or for my mother to say that my finances were my own business, but nobody moved. A murmur rippled through the relatives at the far end of the table. $5.7 million, my uncle whispered to his wife. Did she really say that that is more than this entire neighborhood is worth? The look in their eyes shifted. Minutes ago, I had been their niece, their cousin, the girl who moved away to the city. Now, I was something else. I was a lottery ticket. I was a walking, talking bank vault that had the audacity to keep its door locked. My mother, Linda, slowly placed her wine glass on the coaster. She did not look at Hazel. She looked at me. Her expression was not one of pride. It was a grimace, the kind she used to make when I tracked mud onto the carpet as a child. "Brinley," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment, "you know your sister is going through a very difficult transition period right now. She is struggling to find her footing. Did you really feel it was necessary to come in here and flaunt your wealth like that, right now?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "Mom, I wasn't flaunting anything. I was sharing a life update. I have worked for this for over 10 years. I thought you would be happy for me." "Happy?" Hazel laughed, a brittle, jagged sound. "How can anyone be happy when you are so selfish? You have never shared anything. Not once." "That is not true," I said, my voice tightening. "I have helped you. I helped you with your car down payment 2 years ago. I helped you when you moved to Cedar Falls." "Breadcrumbs," Hazel spat. "You throw me breadcrumbs to make yourself feel better. Meanwhile, I am drowning in credit card debt. The interest alone is eating me alive. And you are throwing millions into a vacation home in Florida just so you can sip cocktails and look at the water. It is disgusting." I gripped the edge of the table. "It is not a vacation home. It is an investment, and it is my primary residence. I earned it." "Hazel, I did not ask Mom and Dad for a dime. I worked 80 hours a week for years to get to this position. I missed holidays. I missed birthdays. I lived in a studio apartment the size of this table, while you were living in the condo Mom and Dad paid for." "Enough," my father, Martin, barked. He leaned forward, his elbows resting heavily on the tablecloth. He had always been a man who commanded the room, not through logic, but through sheer volume and patriarchal weight. He looked at me with a mix of disbelief and judgment. "We are not going to rehash the past," he said, "but your sister makes a point. Brinley, $5.7 million is an obscene amount of money for one person. Have you ever stopped to think, even for 1 second, that you could use a portion of that to help your sister build a stable life? Have you—" I stared at him, stunned. "Dad, are you serious? You think my income is a family pool?" "I think family takes care of family," he said, his tone self-righteous. "That is what we do. We sacrificed everything to raise you. We put you through school, and now that you have made it, you turn your back. You act like your success exists in a vacuum. It doesn't. You stand on our shoulders, and yet you kick your sister in the face on your way up." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I looked around the table again. My aunt was shaking her head in disapproval. My cousin was looking at his plate, avoiding my eyes. They did not see a woman who had pulled herself up from an entry-level intern to a director managing massive acquisitions. They saw a resource. They saw a discrepancy in the ledger. I had too much. Hazel had too little, and therefore, I was the villain for not correcting the balance. Hazel saw that the tide had turned in her favor. She slumped in her chair, letting the tears flow freely now. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times, but it never failed to work on our parents. "I just don't understand why she hates me so much," Hazel sobbed, wiping her eyes with a linen napkin. "I have been trying so hard. I sent out 5 resumes last week. 5. But nobody is hiring. The system is rigged against me, and she just comes in here, in her designer suit, rubbing it in my face. She abandoned this family years ago. She only cares about her career and her bank account." "Oh, Hazel, honey, don't cry," my mother cooed, reaching across the table to pat Hazel's hand. She turned her gaze back to me, her eyes hard. "Look what you have done, Brinley. You have ruined dinner." "I ruined dinner?" I asked, incredulous. "I mentioned buying a house." Hazel is the one screaming. "You provoked her," my mother snapped. "You know how sensitive she is about her financial situation. You lack empathy. Brinley, you always have. You are so cold." "I am not cold," I said. Standing up, my legs felt shaky. "I am practical, and I'm tired of being treated like I need to apologize for succeeding. Why is Hazel's failure my responsibility? Why is my hard work considered a crime in this house?" "Because you are lucky," Hazel yelled, dropping the crying act for a split second to glare at me. You got lucky with that job. You got lucky that your boss liked you. It could have been me. It should have been me. But you hoarded it all. Luck had nothing to do with it, I said quietly, though I knew they weren't listening. I worked while you slept. That is the difference. Apologize, my mother said. I looked at her. What? Apologize to your sister for bragging, Linda demanded. And apologize to the family for disrupting Thanksgiving with your arrogance. I stood there, surrounded by the people who shared my DNA, and I felt completely alone. The 80-hour work weeks, the missed sleep, the stress-induced migraines, the relentless pressure of closing deals, all of it was dismissed. To them, I was just a selfish girl who refused to share her toys. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. On the lock screen was a photo I had taken just 2 days ago from the balcony of the Solana Bay condo. The ocean was a brilliant, deep turquoise, stretching out to the horizon. It was peaceful. It was mine. I am not apologizing, I said. Hazel sniffled loudly. See, she is so selfish. You are going to end up all alone in that big, empty condo. Brinley, just you and your money, and when you need someone, when you finally realize that money doesn't hug you back, don't come crying to us, because you won't have anyone left. I looked at the photo on my screen one last time. Then I looked at Hazel, whose face was twisted in a mask of triumphant victimhood, and at my parents, who looked at me with disdain. That night, I understood something for the first time, in their eyes. My success had never belonged to me. It was simply a harvest they were waiting to reap, and because I had stored it in my own barn, I was a thief in my own home. Maybe you are right, I said softly to the room, though nobody was really listening anymore. Maybe I will be alone. I sat back down, picked up my wine glass, and took a long sip. The expensive Pinot Noir tasted like vinegar. The turkey was cold, and the line between family and parasite had just been erased completely. To understand why the silence at that Thanksgiving table felt so violent, you have to understand the noise of the decade that preceded it. You have to see the two very different movies that were playing on the split screen of our lives. I remember the smell of my first apartment in Ridgemont, Alabama. It was a basement studio that smelled perpetually of damp drywall and other people's cooking. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, and working as an unpaid intern at a boutique brokerage firm that specialized in commercial leases. I slept on a mattress I had dragged off the curb, cleaned with 3 cans of disinfectant, and I ate ramen noodles so often that the smell of sodium seasoning packets still makes me nauseous today. My life was a blur of 12 to 14-hour days. I was the first one in the office, unlocking the doors before the sun came up, and the last one to leave, usually turning off the lights long after the cleaning crew had finished. My job description was non-existent, which meant I did everything. I cold-called list after list of hostile business owners who screamed at me for interrupting their morning. I drafted contracts that I barely understood, staying up until 3 a.m. with a legal dictionary to make sure I was not making a mistake. I wiped down whiteboards. I fetched coffee orders that had to be precise to the temperature degree. I was treated like furniture, but I did not care. I was in the room. I was near the deals. That was all that mattered. 300 miles away, in Cedar Falls. Hazel had just graduated with a degree in communications. She did not have to scour job boards or cold call HR departments. Dad made one phone call to an old fraternity brother, and Hazel was handed a junior marketing coordinator position at a mid-sized agency. She did not live in a basement. Mom and Dad insisted that she needed a safe environment to foster her creativity, so they paid the deposit and the first 6 months of rent on a 1-bedroom apartment in a complex that had a saltwater pool and a fitness center. I remember visiting her once, early on. I drove my rusting sedan 4 hours to see her, and she met me at the door wearing a silk robe, complaining that the water pressure in her shower was not strong enough. I was calculating whether I could afford to put gas in my tank to get home. She was worried about pounds per square inch. It took 8 months for that reality to fracture. I received a call from Mom on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of organizing a filing cabinet that had not been touched since the 90s, dust coating my throat. "Your sister is coming home," Mom said, her voice soft and protective. "Is she sick?" I asked, panic flaring briefly. "No, she quit her job," Mom said. "It was a toxic environment. Brinley, you have no idea what that poor girl went through. Her boss was a tyrant. He didn't appreciate her unique perspective. He wanted her to do data entry when she was clearly hired for creative strategy. It was stifling her spirit." I paused, holding a stack of manila folders. "Mom, it was an entry-level job. Everyone does data entry." "Not Hazel," Mom snapped. "Hazel is different. She has a vision." She tried to explain to them how they should be running their campaigns, and they shut her down. It was abusive, really. We told her to pack her bags and come home. She deserves better than to be treated like a cog in a machine. That was the narrative. It was always the narrative. While Hazel spent the next 6 months decompressing in her childhood bedroom, I was promoted to contract support. My salary was barely above the poverty line, but it was a paycheck. I did not ask Mom and Dad for rent money. I did not ask them to help with my student loans. I assumed that adulthood was a solitary pursuit, a mountain you climbed alone. I was wrong. For Hazel, adulthood was a group project where she did none of the work but got an A because her parents bullied the teacher. Over the next few years, the pattern solidified into concrete. Hazel would find a new passion, and my parents would fund the launch. First, it was public relations for a nonprofit. She lasted 4 months before quitting because the emotional labor was too intense. Then she decided she was an event planner. Mom bought her a high-end laptop and a subscription to professional design software. Hazel planned one birthday party, got into an argument with the client about the color of the napkins, and decided the industry was too shallow for her depth of soul. Then came social media management, then freelance copywriting, then a brief, expensive stint trying to become a lifestyle influencer. Every time she quit, or was fired, the excuse was external. The system was broken. The managers were threatened by her intelligence. The hours were inhumane. And every time, Martin and Linda were there with the safety net. "She is just finding her path," Dad would tell me over the phone, his voice defensive before I had even said a word. "Not everyone is a robot like you. Brinley, Hazel is an artist. She feels things deeply. She needs the right soil to bloom." I was the robot. I was the machine, because I showed up on time, because I ate insults for breakfast and asked for seconds if it meant closing a deal. The defining moment of my early career came when I landed the interview at Harborstone Crest Developments. It was one of the premier real estate development firms in the Southeast. The interview process was a 3-month gauntlet, 7 rounds of interviews, a case study that required me to build a financial model for a mixed-use development from scratch in 48 hours. I did not sleep. I did not eat. I poured every ounce of knowledge I had accumulated into that presentation. When I got the call that I had been hired as an associate, I felt a euphoria so intense I nearly passed out. I called home immediately. "That is nice, honey," Mom said, sounding distracted. "Listen, can I call you back? Hazel is having a crisis. The transmission on her car blew out, and she is stranded on the highway. She is hysterical." "I got the job, Mom," I said, my voice shrinking. "At Harborstone. I heard you. Brinley, that is great, really, but your sister is on the side of the road. I have to go." The line went dead. I went out to dinner alone that night. I sat at the bar of a steakhouse, ordered a glass of champagne, and toasted myself in the mirror behind the bar. I was 26 years old, and I learned then that no cavalry was coming. If I wanted a celebration, I had to throw it myself. The years that followed were a blur of airports and cheap hotels. While Hazel was posting photos of avocado toast and mimosa brunches with captions about self-care and following your dreams, I was living out of a suitcase. I stayed in motels where the doors opened to the parking lot because I wanted to save the company money on my expense report, hoping they would notice my fiscal responsibility. I spent my nights in those rooms not watching television, but studying. I taught myself zoning laws, I memorized the tax codes of 3 different states. I learned how to read a surveyor's map better than the surveyors. I became lethal in negotiations because I knew more than the person sitting across from me. I missed Christmas one year because I was closing a deal in Georgia. I missed my cousin's wedding because of a zoning hearing in South Carolina. I missed countless Sunday dinners. And what did my family see? They did not see the sacrifice. They saw the absence. "You work too much," Hazel would say, sniffing at me during the rare times I visited. She would be lounging on the sofa in our parents' living room, wearing a new sweater that I knew she had not paid for. "You are obsessed with money. It is sad, really. You are missing out on life." She said this while my parents were in the kitchen, cooking her dinner. She said this while driving the car my father had paid off for her because the monthly payments were stressing her out. When I started making real money, the kind of money that changes tax brackets, the dynamic shifted in a subtle, insidious way. My parents stopped asking how I was doing. They assumed that because the numbers in my bank account were high, I had no problems. I was stable. I was fine. Therefore, I required zero investment. All their emotional and financial bandwidth was redirected to Hazel. It was a hydraulic system of parenting. The higher I rose, the more resources flowed down to the bottom to prop her up. "We helped Hazel pay off her credit card," Dad mentioned casually once, as if he were talking about the weather. "She got into a bit of a hole with that trip to Cabo, but she needed the break. She was burnt out." "She doesn't have a job, Dad," I said, gripping the phone. "How can she be burnt out?" "Job hunting is a full-time job. Brinley," he scolded, "don't be uncharitable." I paid off my own student loans. I drove my car until the engine block cracked. I bought my first townhouse with a 20% down payment that took me 4 years to save. And every time I achieved something, the reaction was a polite nod, followed by a monologue about Hazel's latest struggle. I began to realize the currency of my family. The currency was not love, it was pity. If you were broken, you were valuable. You were a project that Linda and Martin could fix, which gave them purpose. If you were whole, if you were strong, you were useless to them. You were just a background character in the drama of Hazel's life. My silence, my refusal to complain, became my prison. Because I did not scream. They assumed I was not bleeding. Because Hazel screamed at the paper cut of daily existence, they rushed to her with bandages made of cash. The juxtaposition that haunts me the most, the image that was burned into my mind right before everything exploded, happened last year. I was flying back from a site visit in Charleston. It was a red-eye flight because I had to be back in the office by 8 in the morning. I was sitting in economy class, wedged between a man who smelled like stale tobacco and the window. My suit was wrinkled. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand. I had a headache that was throbbing behind my left eye, a relentless drumbeat of exhaustion. I was reviewing a 100-page environmental impact report on a tablet, marking it up with a stylus, trying to keep my hand steady as the plane shook with turbulence. I decided to take a break and open social media, a rare indulgence. The first thing on my feed was a story from Hazel. It was a video. She was lying in bed at our parents' house. It was 10 in the morning on a Wednesday. The sunlight was streaming in, soft and golden. She was wrapped in a plush, white duvet, a brand new bedding set I knew Mom had just bought from a luxury catalog because she had mentioned it on the phone. Hazel looked rested. Her skin was glowing. She was holding a mug of coffee and smiling at the camera. The caption read, "Listening to my body today. Sometimes productivity is just resting. Grateful for this slow morning." She was 30 years old. She was unemployed. She was sleeping in sheets that cost more than my first car, in a house she did not pay for, drinking coffee she did not buy. And I was 30,000 feet in the air, vibrating with caffeine and anxiety, wearing a suit that felt like a straitjacket, earning the money that my family seemed to despise. I turned off the tablet. I leaned my head against the cold plastic of the airplane window and closed my eyes. I did not sleep. I just sat there in the dark, feeling the vibration of the engines in my teeth, and realized that the plane was not the only thing keeping me isolated from the world below. I was in a different atmosphere entirely. and I was beginning to suspect that I could never land in Willow Ridge again. The drive back to Riverton, Florida, usually took me 6 hours, but that night it felt like an eternity of white lines and asphalt stretching into a black void. The silence in my car was absolute, yet my head was screaming. The word selfish bounced around my skull like a rubber ball in a small room, gaining velocity with every impact. Selfish. It is a terrifying word when wielded by the people who raised you. It is designed to dismantle your defenses, to make you question the very foundation of your reality. Was I selfish? Was buying a home with money I had earned, after paying taxes on it, after saving it, a moral failing? My phone, resting in the cup holder, would not let me find an answer. It lit up every few minutes, a strobe light of guilt in the darkened cabin of my SUV. The messages were from my mother. Linda, did you even stop to think about your sister's feelings before you made that announcement? Family stands together. Brinley, we do not tear each other down. Then came the audio files, voice notes. I made the mistake of playing one as I crossed the Georgia state line. The sound of Hazel sobbing filled the car, a wet, ragged sound that I knew was at least 50% performance and 50% genuine self-pity. She just feels so behind. My mother's voice whispered over the recording of Hazel's tears. She looks at you, and she feels like a failure. You have to fix this. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Fix this. As if my sister's lack of career trajectory was a leaky faucet I had neglected to tighten. When my father's name flashed on the dashboard screen, I hesitated. I considered letting it go to voicemail. I considered throwing the phone out the window into the swampy darkness of the interstate. But the daughter in me, the one who still desperately wanted approval, even at 33, pressed the answer button on the steering wheel. "Hello, Dad," I said. My voice sounded calm, which was a lie. "Brinley," Martin said. His voice was heavy, carrying the weight of a judge pronouncing a sentence. "I am calling because we need to have a serious conversation. The entire family is very hurt right now." "I gathered that from the 30 text messages Mom sent me," I said. "Do not be sarcastic," he snapped. "It does not suit you. Your mother is devastated. She tried to make a nice Thanksgiving dinner, and you turned it into a showcase for your ego." I mentioned I bought a house. "Dad, that is it." "It was not just a house. It was the way you said it. The price tag. The location. You came in there and rubbed your sister's nose in it. You know Hazel is fragile right now." "Hazel is 30 years old," I said, hearing the sharpness rise in my throat. "When does she stop being fragile? When does she start being an adult?" There was a long pause on the line, filled only by the static of the connection. When my father spoke again, his tone had shifted from anger to a patronizing disappointment that cut deeper. "You have become so hard, Brinley. We have watched it happen over the years. You rarely come home to visit. You missed Hazel's 30th birthday party because of some conference." "It was a board meeting for a $40 million acquisition," I corrected him, "and I sent her a gift card for $500. "Money," he scoffed. "That is all you think about. You think you can throw money at people and that replaces presence. You think your checkbook is a substitute for love. You prioritize your career over the people who made you who you are." "My career is who I am," I said, "and my career is what allows me to pay my bills." "And that is the point," Martin said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, almost demanding register. "You have done well. We are not denying that. But you have done so well that you have lost perspective. $5.7 million. Brinley, do you have any idea what that kind of money could do for this family? For your sister?" I merged into the right lane, my heart rate spiking. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that if you have enough disposable income to buy a beachfront mansion, then surely you have enough to help Hazel get on her feet properly. Why is she struggling to pay her student loans when her sister is buying real estate portfolios? Why is she worrying about rent?" I nearly slammed on the brakes. "Are you suggesting I should pay her loans?" "I am suggesting you do what is right," he said firmly. You could pay off her student debt tomorrow and not even feel it. You could rent her a decent apartment in a safe neighborhood for a year, just to give her some breathing room, so she stops drowning in stress. That is what family does. We share the load. I have helped her, I argued, my voice rising. I gave her $2,000 when her transmission blew. I gave her $3,000 when she wanted to start that jewelry business that lasted 2 weeks. I have introduced her to 3 different hiring managers in marketing, and she ghosted all of them. That is in the past, Martin dismissed, waving away my facts as if they were annoying flies. She is in a dark place now. She needs a real lifeline, not just scraps. She is suffering. Brinley, you are not. You are sitting on a mountain of gold and watching your sister starve. It is immoral. I am not watching her starve, I said, trembling with rage. I am watching her refuse to work. There you go again, he said, disgust dripping from his words. Judging her. You think you are better than her because you are good at capitalism. Well, let me tell you something. Being rich does not make you a good person. Helping your family makes you a good person. Before I could respond, I heard my mother's voice in the background, and then she was on the line, likely on speakerphone. Brinley, Linda said. Her voice was less aggressive than Dad's, but far more insidious. It was the voice of a negotiator trying to close a hostage situation. Listen to me. We are not asking you to give her cash if you do not trust her. We have a better idea. I braced myself. What? Harborstone, she said. Your company. It is huge, isn't it? You have hundreds of employees. Yes. Well, surely you can find a spot for Hazel. It does not have to be a big executive role like yours. Just something with a good salary. Maybe $80,000 or $90,000 a year. Something stable, with benefits. You know she is good with people. She just needs a foot in the door. I stared at the road ahead, the red taillights of a semi-truck blurring in my vision. They were not asking for a favor. They were not asking for a referral. They were demanding a placement. Mom, I said slowly, I cannot just give her a job. That is not how it works. We have a strict hiring process. We have anti-nepotism policies. Oh, please, Linda sighed. You are the director. You make the rules. Don't hide behind bureaucracy with your own mother. If you wanted to help her, you would find a way. You just don't want her there. You don't want her to shine. She has no experience in real estate development, I said, trying to cling to logic. She has a degree in communications and a resume full of gaps. She is your sister, my father roared from the background. That is the only qualification she needs from you. The call ended shortly after that. I hung up because I knew if I stayed on the line, I would scream something I couldn't take back. I drove the remaining 3 hours in a state of cold, hard fury. The transition had happened so subtly I almost missed it. Somewhere between my first promotion and my latest bonus, I had ceased to be a daughter. I had ceased to be a person with feelings, needs, or limits. I had become an entity. I was a bank. I was a connection. I was a resource to be mined. They looked at my $5.7 million condo and they did not see my late nights. They did not see the ulcers. They did not see the risk I carried every day. They saw a pile of money that they believed belonged to the family collective. And the most twisting part of the knife was the realization that they genuinely believed they were right. In their minds, my autonomy was a form of theft. By keeping what I earned, I was stealing from Hazel. I pulled into the driveway of my current rental in Riverton at 2 a.m. The humidity of Florida wrapped around me as I stepped out of the car, a stark contrast to the crisp air of North Carolina. I walked inside, tossed my keys on the counter, and looked at the empty living room. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Linda. Please think about the job. It would mean the world to us. It would heal this family. It was emotional blackmail, pure and simple. They were holding their love hostage, and the ransom was a mid-level management position for a woman who could not wake up before 10 a.m. I walked over to the kitchen island and poured myself a glass of water. My hand was shaking, but not from sadness anymore. The sadness had evaporated on Interstate 95, replaced by a clarity that felt like ice water in my veins. I thought about the word boundaries. I had tried to set them before. I cannot come home this weekend. I have work. I cannot lend you that money. I have a mortgage. Every time I said no, they translated it into ungrateful. They weaponized the past. They weaponized my childhood. They acted as if raising me was a loan I had taken out, and now they were calling in the debt with massive interest. I looked at my laptop bag sitting on the chair. Inside was the pro forma for the marina deal, the project that would define the next 5 years of my career. It was complex, high risk, and required my absolute focus. If I brought Hazel into my world, if I let her chaos bleed into the one place where I had control, I would lose everything. Harborstone was not a charity. It was a shark tank. Hazel would not last 5 minutes, and when she failed, she would drag me down with her. I picked up my phone. I did not reply to the text. I did not listen to the voice notes. I slid the little switch on the side of the device, silencing it completely. Then I turned it face down on the marble counter. For the first time in my life, the silence did not feel lonely. It felt like a shield. No, I whispered to the empty room. It was a complete sentence, and I was going to learn how to say it loud enough for them to hear. Even if I had to shatter the entire family to do it, I would not let them use the blood in my veins to sign checks they hadn't earned. I walked over to my laptop and flipped it open. The blue light of the screen illuminated my face. I had a deal to close. And unlike my family, the numbers on the screen never lied to me. The air inside the headquarters of Harborstone Crest Developments was always exactly 68 degrees. It was a crisp, artificial climate designed to keep heart rates steady and minds sharp. While the Florida heat beat against the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of our Riverton office, inside, we operated in a hermetically sealed bubble of high finance and ruthless efficiency. This building was my sanctuary. It was a fortress of steel, glass, and polished concrete, where emotions were considered a liability and numbers were the only language that mattered. Here, nobody cared if I was a good sister or a dutiful daughter. They cared about the return on investment. They cared about zoning permits. They cared about the bottom line. I walked into the acquisition department at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning, holding a double shot of espresso that cost $6, a price I paid gladly for the clarity it provided. My heels clicked rhythmically against the terrazzo floor, a sound that usually grounded me. Today, however, the ghost of my family's accusations walked beside me. Selfish. The word echoed in my head as I passed the rows of junior analysts already hunched over their dual monitors, analyzing market trends. I made my way to the main conference room. We were in the final stages of the Old Port Marina acquisition. This was the deal that had defined my last 18 months. It was a massive, $85 million project that involved purchasing a decaying industrial harbor, remediating the soil, and transforming it into a luxury mixed-use complex. It was the kind of project that made careers. And the bonus structure attached to its successful closing was what had allowed me to put the down payment on the Solana Bay condo. Victor Hale, my managing director, was already there, standing at the head of the table. Victor was a man in his late 50s who wore suits that cost more than my father's car and had eyes that could spot a decimal error from across the room. He did not do small talk. He did not ask about your weekend. He asked about results. "Hamilton," he said, nodding at me as I entered. He tapped the glass whiteboard where the project timeline was drawn out in red marker. The environmental impact study came back. The soil remediation estimates are lower than we projected. We are coming in under budget. "I told you the initial assessment was conservative," I said, setting my laptop down. "I pushed the environmental firm to reevaluate the sediment samples in Zone 4. That saved us about $200,000. Victor allowed himself a rare, tight smile. "That is why you are the coldest closer in this company. Brinley, most people just accept the quote. You interrogate it." He paused, looking at me with a level of respect that my father had never shown me in 33 years. "If we land this closing by the end of the quarter, the board is going to be looking very seriously at the VP spot for you. You know that, right?" "I know," I said, feeling a surge of pride that was immediately chased by a shadow of anxiety. VP, Vice President. It was the role I had been aiming for since I started as a junior associate. It meant equity. It meant a seat at the table where the real decisions were made. "Just keep it steady," Victor said, his tone shifting to a warning. "We have investors from New York flying in next week. They are skittish. They want to see stability. They want to see a team that runs like a Swiss watch. No surprises. No drama." "No drama," I repeated. "Understood." As Victor left the room, the weight of his words settled over me. No drama. Harborstone had a reputation for being clinically professional. We managed hundreds of millions of dollars of other people's money. Trust was our only currency. Because of that, the company had a zero-tolerance policy regarding nepotism. It was written in bold letters in the employee handbook. Page 4, paragraph 2. No family members, no spouses, no exceptions. This policy was not just ink on paper. It was a scar tissue formed from a disaster 3 years ago. A former regional director had hired his nephew as a site manager for a project in Tampa. The nephew was unqualified, cut corners on safety inspections to save time, and missed a structural flaw that ended up costing the company $12 million in lawsuits and repairs. The director was fired. The stock price dipped. The investors revolted. Since then, the hiring process at Harborstone had become a fortress. Every candidate went through background checks, competency tests, and 4 rounds of interviews. I sat alone in the glass-walled conference room, looking at the empty chairs. I closed my eyes and tried to picture Hazel sitting in one of them. I imagined Hazel, who had quit a job because the office was too cold. I imagined Hazel, who had missed a deadline because she was emotionally overwhelmed by a breakup. I imagined her here, in this room, facing Victor Hale. If I used my political capital to force her into a role, even a minor one, it would be a ticking time bomb. When she inevitably arrived late because she overslept, it would be on me. When she sent an email with typos to a client because she did not bother to proofread, it would be on me. When she complained to HR that the workload was toxic because she was asked to work past 5 o'clock, it would be on me, in this world. My reputation was my life. It had taken me a decade to build it, brick by brick, deal by deal. My mother wanted me to take a sledgehammer to it just so Hazel could have a paycheck she did not earn. Later that afternoon, I was pulled into a mandatory compliance meeting with the legal department. It was a quarterly ritual, usually dry and boring, but today every word felt like it was aimed directly at my chest. Our general counsel, a sharp woman named Elena, was pacing in front of a projector screen. "I want to remind everyone about the fiduciary duty we owe to our shareholders," Elena said, her voice crisp. "We operate in a high-liability environment. A bad hire is not just an HR issue, it is a legal risk. We are currently seeing a trend in the industry of negligence lawsuits stemming from unqualified personnel." She clicked a slide. It showed a headline from a competitor firm that was being sued for fraud. "This firm hired the CEO's stepson to manage vendor contracts," Elena explained. "He embezzled $400,000. The CEO claimed ignorance. The court did not care. If you recommend someone, you are vouching for their integrity with your own. Remember that. Your name is on their application." I felt a cold sweat prickle the back of my neck. My name. If I submitted Hazel's resume, I would have to lie. I would have to say she was reliable. I would have to say she was competent. I would be committing professional perjury. After the meeting, I went to the break room to get more water. My hands were shaking slightly. Mara, a senior analyst, and one of the few people at Harborstone I considered a friend, was there. She was leaning against the counter, stirring a packet of raw sugar into her tea. She saw my face and stopped stirring. "You look like you are about to throw up," Mara said. "Is the marina deal going sideways?" "No," I said, rubbing my temples. "The deal is fine. It is my family," Mara grimaced. She knew the broad strokes of my background, the pressure, the guilt trips. Let me guess, the Thanksgiving fallout. "My mother wants me to hire my sister," I whispered, checking the door to make sure no one was listening. "She wants me to get her a job here, at Harborstone." Mara's eyes widened. She actually laughed. A sharp, incredulous sound. Here, is she a lawyer or a structural engineer? She has a degree in communications, and she used to run an Instagram page for a bakery, I said flatly. Brinley, Mara said, her voice dropping to a serious whisper. You know you can't do that. Victor would skin you alive. And even if you snuck her in, she would get eaten by the sharks in marketing within a week. I know, I said. But they are relentless. They are acting like I'm holding the cure for cancer and refusing to share it. My dad said I owe it to them. Mara walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. Listen to me. You are going very far in this company. I see the way Victor looks at your numbers. You are on a trajectory to the C-suite. Do not let anything from the outside drag you down. Not a boyfriend, not a debt, and definitely not a sister who refuses to grow up. They say I am selfish, I said. You are not selfish, Mara said firmly. You are smart. There is a difference. If you bring her in here, you are not helping her. You are just handing her a grenade and standing next to her when she pulls the pin. I went back to my office, feeling the truth of Mara's words settling into my bones. I sat down at my desk and woke up my computer. There was a new email from Linda. The subject line was simply, perspective. I opened it. It was a long, rambling wall of text, but one paragraph stood out. If you do not use your position to lift up your own flesh and blood, then what is the point of all your success? Do you think your job will visit you in the hospital? Do you think your money will hold your hand when you are old? You can build all the towers you want, Brinley, but money does not go with you down to the grave. Your sister needs you. Be a human being, not a corporation. I stared at the screen. To my left, on a second monitor, was the spreadsheet for the Marina project. It was a matrix of logic internal rates of return, capitalization rates, debt service coverage ratios. Every number had a reason. Every number had to balance. To my right was my mother's email, pure emotion, pure manipulation, a demand for resources with zero accountability. They wanted me to help. That was the word they kept using, but their definition of help was distorted. To them, help meant shielding Hazel from the consequences of her own choices. Help meant giving her a prize she hadn't won. Help meant carrying her so her feet never had to touch the rough ground. But that wasn't help. That was crippling her. And if I did what they asked, if I brought her into Harborstone, I would be destroying myself to keep her comfortable. I looked out the window at the Riverton skyline. The sun was beginning to set, casting long orange shadows across the city. I realized then that I was done playing by their rules. I was done with the guilt. I was done with the blackmail. If they wanted me to give Hazel an opportunity, I would give her one. But it would not be a handout. It would not be a fake job with an inflated title and no responsibilities. I thought about my new condo in Solana Bay. It was 5,000 square feet of pristine luxury. I had not moved in yet because I had been too busy with the Marina deal to arrange the logistics. I needed someone to manage the property. I needed someone to handle the deliveries, coordinate with the interior designers, supervise the cleaning crews, and ensure the security systems were functional. It was a real job. It required organization, punctuality, and effort. It paid well better than any barista job Hazel was currently qualified for. But it was not glamorous. It involved scrubbing, checking inventory, and serving the needs of the owner. The owner, me. A slow, cold idea began to form in the back of my mind. It was dangerous. It was petty. But it was also fair. If Hazel wanted a job from her successful sister, she could have one. She could have a salary. She could have a contract. She could have access to the $5.7 million condo she was so jealous of. But she would not be living there as a guest. She would be working there as an employee. I turned away from my mother's email and opened a new document. I typed a header at the top of the page. Job description, residence caretaker. Solana Bay Unit 4B. I looked at the cursor blinking on the white page. You want to learn about the real world? Hazel, I whispered to the empty office. Class is in session. I walked over to the corner of my office where a large architectural 3D model of the old port marina stood on a pedestal. It was a beautiful, intricate thing: tiny plastic trees, miniature boats, little figures walking along the promenade. It represented order. It represented vision. I touched the roof of one of the miniature buildings. I knew the value of every square inch of this project because I had fought for it. Hazel did not know the value of anything because she had never paid the price for it. It was time she learned that opportunity was not a gift you unwrapped on Christmas morning. It was something you built, hour by hour, brick by brick. I sat back down and began to type the contract. The following weekend, I found myself driving back to Willow Ridge. My mother had texted me incessantly about a stack of old financial documents, savings bonds from my grandmother and some previous tax returns, that she claimed were vital for my upcoming filing and that she could not trust to the mail. It was a flimsy excuse, a transparent attempt to lure me back into the house for another round of guilt-tripping, but I needed those papers to close out my personal audit, so I agreed to stop by on Sunday afternoon. I pulled into the driveway at 2 p.m. My father's truck was gone, likely at the hardware store, and my mother's sedan was missing, which meant she was probably at the grocery store preparing for Sunday dinner. The house was quiet. I had a key, a relic from a time when this place felt like home. So I did not bother to knock. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the foyer. The house smelled of lemon polish and stagnation. I was about to call out to see if anyone was home when I heard a voice coming from the living room. It was Hazel, but it was not the weeping, fragile Hazel who had sobbed at the Thanksgiving table. It was not the broken victim my parents had described to me in hushed, worried tones. She was laughing. It was a bright, sharp sound, full of excitement and arrogance. I froze, my hand still on the doorknob, and instinctively eased the door shut behind me without making a sound. I knew I should announce myself. I knew eavesdropping was a violation of privacy, but something in the tone of her voice, a triumphant, scheming quality, made my stomach turn over. I stepped softly onto the runner rug in the hallway and moved closer to the archway that separated the foyer from the living room. Hazel was pacing. I could hear her footsteps on the hardwood. She was on the phone, her voice loud and clear. "No, seriously, Tiffany, it is basically a done deal," Hazel said. "I talked to Mom and Dad, and they are totally on my side. They told Brinley she has to fix this. She knows she messed up." I pressed my back against the wall, my breath catching in my throat. Messed up I had bought a house with my own money. How was that messing up? "She is going to get me in at Harborstone," Hazel continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried perfectly in the silent house. "I told them I need something in management, senior level, 6 figures. Obviously, I am not doing grunt work. I have paid my dues." I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to storm in there and scream. Paid her dues. She had not held a job for longer than 8 months in her entire life. "And here's the best part," Hazel said, giggling. "Once I get the job, I am going to tell her I need temporary housing while I get settled. She has that massive condo in Solana Bay. It has 4 bedrooms. She is never there. I can just crash there for a few months. Imagine the pool parties. Tiff, it is right on the ocean. I deserve a little luxury after everything I have been through." There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. Then Hazel scoffed. "She owes me," Hazel snapped, her tone hardening. "She bought that place without even asking us. Who does that? She walks around with her designer bags acting like she is better than everyone. Dad said it himself. She needs to compensate the family for being so selfish. It is the least she can do. I am just collecting what is mine." I stood there, paralyzed. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it stopped beating. It was not just that she wanted a job. It was the calculation. It was the entitlement. She viewed me not as a sister, but as a host organism. I was a resource to be harvested. In her mind, my success was actually an insult to her, a debt that I had incurred simply by doing better than she did. She had already planned out her future, my job, my condo, my pool, as if they were inheritances she was waiting to receive. "Yeah, I will probably take the master suite when she is traveling. Hazel laughed again. She won't mind. She is so desperate for Mom's approval she will let me do whatever I want. That was the final blow. It was the truth. Naked and ugly. She knew my weakness. She knew that deep down, the little girl inside me just wanted Linda and Martin to be proud, and she was weaponizing that desire to rob me blind. I did not go into the living room. I could not. If I saw her face right now, I would have lost control. I would have said things that would have burned bridges I was not ready to burn yet. I turned around, my movements mechanical. I opened the front door, slipped out, and closed it silently behind me. I walked to my car, my legs feeling heavy and numb, like I was walking through wet concrete. I got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. My hands were trembling violently as I gripped the steering wheel. I stared at the front door of the house, waiting for it to open, waiting for Hazel to come running out. But nothing happened. The house stood there, silent and complicit. I started the engine and backed out of the driveway. I did not care about the tax papers anymore. I did not care about the audit. I needed to get away from the toxicity radiating from that building before it poisoned me completely. As I hit the highway back to Riverton, the trembling in my hands began to subside. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity, the kind of clarity I felt right before I walked into a negotiation room to dismantle a competitor. Hazel wanted a job. She wanted access to my world. She wanted to be part of the Harborstone ecosystem and the Solana Bay lifestyle. "Okay," I whispered to the empty car. "You want in? Let's see if you can handle the price of admission." I reached for my phone and dialed Mara. It was Sunday, but in our line of work, there were no weekends. "Hamilton," Mara answered on the second ring. "Please tell me the marina deal didn't implode." "The deal is fine," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, devoid of emotion. "I need a referral. You know that employment lawyer we used for the contract staff at the Darker project, the one who specializes in service industry contracts?" "Yeah, Simon," Mara said. "Why are you firing someone?" "I am hiring someone," I said. "I need a contract drawn up, a specific one, for a property caretaker for my condo in Solana Bay." "I thought you were going to hire a management company for that," Mara said. "I changed my mind. I want a live-in caretaker, someone to handle the maintenance, the deep cleaning, the security checks, the inventory. I want the contract to be watertight. Mara, I mean ironclad. Detailed scope of work, performance metrics, grounds for termination. I do not want there to be any room for interpretation. If they miss a shift, if they fail a task, I want the ability to cut them loose immediately without legal recourse." There was a silence on the other end. Mara was smart. She connected the dots instantly. "Brinley," she said slowly, "who is this for?" "You told me not to let family drag me down," I said, watching the mile markers flash by. "You were right, but my family is insisting that I give my sister an opportunity. They say she needs a job. They say she needs a stable income. So I am going to give her one." "You are going to make your sister your maid?" Mara asked. Her voice was a mix of shock and admiration. "Not a maid," I corrected. "A residence caretaker. It is a legitimate position. It pays well. $55,000 a year plus health insurance benefits. That is more than she would make as a barista or a retail associate. It is a real job." "Mara, but it is actual work. It is not sitting in a boardroom pretending to be an executive. It is scrubbing floors. It is managing contractors. It is earning her keep." "She will never sign it," Mara said. "Maybe not," I said. "But if I offer it to her a real job, with a real salary, in the exact location she claims she wants to live, and she refuses it because she thinks the work is beneath her, then I have my answer. And more importantly, I have my defense. I can look my parents in the eye and tell them I offered her a lifeline and she slapped it away." "This is dangerous," Mara warned. "If she actually takes it, you are going to be her boss. Can you handle that?" "If she takes it," I said, "she will either learn what hard work actually looks like, or she will quit in a week. Either way, the delusion ends. She thinks I owe her a life of luxury. I am going to show her that the luxury comes with a price tag. I will text you Simon's number, Mara said. Make sure you add a confidentiality clause. You do not want her tweeting about your dirty laundry. Good point. Thanks, Mara. I hung up and stared at the road. The anger that had been consuming me for weeks was gone. In its place was a sense of purpose. Hazel wanted to play games. She wanted to use emotional blackmail to leverage a career she hadn't earned. She thought she was the main character in a drama where I was the villain keeping her from her destiny. I was about to rewrite the script. I spent the rest of the drive drafting the job description in my head. Position Solana Bay. Residence caretaker. Reporting to owner Brinley Hamilton. Duties include daily cleaning of all living areas, management of linens and laundry, coordination of maintenance vendors, grocery procurement, security system monitoring, plant care, pre-arrival preparation for owner. It was not the senior marketing manager role she had bragged to Tiffany about. It did not come with a corner office or an expense account. It came with a mop and a checklist, but it was an opportunity. It was a chance to prove that she was willing to work for the life she wanted. I pulled into my driveway in Riverton as the sun was setting. I walked straight to my home office and opened my laptop. I typed out the draft. Every bullet point sharp and precise. I imagined the look on Hazel's face when she realized that the pool parties she had fantasized about would only happen after she had skimmed the leaves out of the water herself. I printed the document. It was 5 pages long. I picked up a pen and signed the bottom of the offer letter, my signature distinct and firm. Okay, Hazel, I whispered, looking at the paper. You want an opportunity, you can have it, but this time, you are going to get your hands dirty. I felt a faint smile tug at the corner of my mouth. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who had finally realized that no was a powerful word, but a conditional yes could be a devastating weapon. The notification light on my phone was blinking a relentless, angry red. I was sitting in the main boardroom at Harborstone, midway through a critical strategy session regarding the marina acquisition. The air in the room was heavy with the scent of dry erase markers and cooling coffee. Victor Hale was pacing at the front of the room, dissecting the zoning variance timeline, his voice a steady drone of authority. My phone, face down on the mahogany table, vibrated again and again. It was a sustained, frantic buzzing that made the glass of water next to it ripple. I glanced down. Mom, pick up. Emergency. Mom, family crisis. Brinley, answer our now. Mom, your sister. My stomach dropped. In the landscape of my family, the word crisis could mean anything from a flat tire to a terminal diagnosis. But given the escalating tension since Thanksgiving, I knew this was not a medical emergency. This was a financial one. Hamilton, Victor asked, pausing mid-sentence. Is everything all right? I looked up, masking the panic with the practiced neutral expression I wore for negotiations. My apologies. Victor, it seems to be a family emergency. I need 5 minutes. Take 10, he said, though his eyes flicked to the clock. We need your input on the environmental remediation numbers when you get back. I grabbed my phone and walked out of the boardroom, my heels clicking sharply against the polished concrete of the corridor. I found a quiet alcove near the elevators, a space enclosed by floor-to-ceiling glass that looked out over the scorching Florida afternoon. I dialed my mother. She answered before the first ring finished. Brinley, Linda wailed. She was crying, that high-pitched, hysterical sound that always made my chest tighten with a reflex of guilt. Oh, thank God. It is a disaster, an absolute disaster. Mom, calm down, I said, pressing a hand against the cool glass. Is everyone okay? Is Dad okay? It is Hazel, she sobbed. They fired her. Brinley. They just threw her out on the street like she was garbage. Can you believe it, after everything she gave to that company? I closed my eyes and exhaled a long, slow breath. Hazel had been working at a boutique media firm in Oak Ridge for exactly 4 months. It was her longest tenure in 2 years. Why did they fire her, Mom? I asked, keeping my voice even. It is completely unfair, Linda shouted, ignoring the question. They said she was consistently tardy. Can you imagine? Because she was 10 or 15 minutes late a few times, she has insomnia. Brinley. She has trouble waking up in the mornings. It is a medical issue. And they said she didn't finish the holiday campaign on time. But how could she? The deadline was unreasonable. They set her up to fail. I leaned my forehead against the glass. In the corporate world, being consistently late and missing a holiday campaign deadline were not minor infractions. They were cause for immediate termination, but in the Hamilton household, they were evidence of a conspiracy. So she was fired for cause, I said. She was fired because they are heartless, Linda snapped, her sorrow instantly pivoting to anger. And now she has lost her income. She has credit card payments due next week. She has her car note. She's going to lose everything. She is in her room right now, threatening to… Oh God, Brinley. She is so depressed. You have to do something. I cannot get her job back. Mom. I am not asking you to get her job back. That place was toxic anyway, Linda said. I am saying you need to step up. You are the big sister. You are the one with the connections. You are the one with the $5.7 million condo. The phone fumbled on the other end, and I heard a scuffle. Then my father's voice boomed through the speaker. Brinley, Martin said. He sounded furious, as if I were the one who had fired her. Your mother is a wreck. Are you happy? Dad, I am at work, I said, my patience fraying. I stepped out of a meeting for this. Good, Martin said. You should be stepping out. Your family is falling apart while you are sitting in your ivory tower. We sacrificed our entire lives so you two could have futures. And now look, Hazel is drowning. She needs help. Brinley, real help. Not a gift card. Not a pep talk. She needs you to use that power you are so proud of. I cannot fix her life for her, Dad. You can, he yelled. You just choose not to. You bought that condo to show off, didn't you? To prove you are better than us? Well, if you are so successful, prove it. Fix this. Do you understand the word family? It means nobody gets left behind. Right now, you are speeding ahead in a Ferrari and leaving your sister in the dust. I heard sobbing in the background, loud, theatrical sobbing. Let me talk to her. Hazel's voice came through, thick with tears. Daddy, give me the phone. There was another shuffle, and then Hazel was on the line. Brinley, she choked out. They ruined me, my boss. She was a monster. She was jealous of me. She knew I had better ideas than her. So she sabotaged my schedule. She didn't tell me the meeting times changed. It is not my fault. I listened to the familiar refrain. It was never her fault. It was the traffic. It was the alarm clock. It was the jealous boss. It was the universe conspiring against Hazel Pierce. I am sorry you lost your job. Hazel, I said, and I meant it. I was sorry. I was sorry she was 30 years old and still incapable of taking accountability for her own life. I don't want your pity, she sniffed. I need a solution. I cannot go back to retail. Brinley, I physically can't. My anxiety won't handle it. I need something real, something that pays enough to get these debt collectors off my back. She took a wet, ragged breath. You know people, she said, her voice shifting from sorrow to demand. You are a director. You can get me into Harborstone, or one of those agencies you work with. I just need a management position, senior communications manager, or marketing lead. Something in the $80,000 to $100,000 range. That is all I'm asking. Just get me the interview, and make sure they know I'm your sister. I promise I won't make you look bad. I stood there in the alcove, looking at the reflection of my own face in the glass. I looked tired, but I also looked resolved. I thought about the meeting happening 10 yards away. I thought about Victor Hale and his zero-tolerance policy. I thought about the legal department's warning. If I did what she asked, if I used my capital to install her in a role she was woefully unqualified for, I would be putting a gun to the head of my own career. But then, I remembered the document sitting on my laptop back in my office, the one I had drafted after hearing her on the phone in Willow Ridge. Solana Bay residence caretaker. My heart started to beat faster. A heavy thud against my ribs. This was it. The crossroads. Okay, I said. My voice was calm. I will help you. The sobbing on the other end stopped instantly. Really? Hazel asked, hope and entitlement blending in her voice. Oh my God. Thank you. I knew you would come through. So, is it at Harborstone? When can I start? It is not at Harborstone, I said firmly. You know the company policy. I cannot hire family, and I will not ask my partners to hire you based on a lie. What? Hazel's voice sharpened. Then what are you talking about? I have a job opening, I said. It is immediate, it is stable, and it pays $55,000 a year, plus health insurance reimbursement. There was a pause. I could practically hear her doing the math. 55,000 was not the 100,000 she wanted, but it was a lifeline. Okay, she said, sounding hesitant. What is the role? Is it PR? Social media? It is a management position, I said, choosing my words carefully. Property management. Oh, she said, perking up. Like managing a leasing office. No, I said. Managing a specific high-value asset, my condo, the one in Solana Bay. Wait, she said. You want me to manage your condo? I need a full-time live-in caretaker. I explained. I am never there because of work. I need someone on site. The job involves security checks, managing vendor maintenance, handling deliveries, and keeping the interior in showroom condition. That means deep cleaning, laundry, watering the plants, and prepping the unit for when I visit. It comes with a contract, it comes with a salary, and it comes with a room in the unit. The silence that followed was absolute. It lasted for 5 long seconds. Then, Linda's voice cut back in, shrill and incredulous. She must have been listening on speaker. Brinley, Linda said, her voice shaking with rage. Did I hear you correctly? Are you asking your sister who has a college degree, to be your maid? It is not a maid, I said, keeping my tone professional. It is a caretaker. It is a legitimate job in the high-end real estate sector. It requires responsibility. It requires trust. Hazel needs a job. She needs housing. This solves both problems. You are disgusting, Linda spat. You are trying to humiliate her. You want her on her knees scrubbing your toilets while you parade around like a queen. How dare you? It is honest work, Mom, I said. It pays better than the job she just lost. If she needs money, here it is. If she needs a place to live, here it is. But I'm not handing her a fake title and a 6-figure salary for doing nothing. If she wants an opportunity, this is a real one. I am not scrubbing your floors, Hazel screamed. Her voice cracked, raw with indignation. I am a marketing professional. I have a degree. You think I'm going to clean up after you. You are sick. You are actually sick. You just told me you were desperate, I said coldly. You just told me you would lose everything. A desperate person takes a job. Hazel, an entitled person waits for a handout. Which one are you? Brinley, stop this immediately, Martin barked. Apologize to your sister. You offer her a respectable position, or you offer her nothing. Then the answer is nothing, I said. Because I will not risk my reputation to get her a job she is not qualified for. This is the offer. Take it or leave it. You are doing this to hurt me, Hazel yelled. You are jealous because Mom and Dad love me more. You want to treat me like a servant to make yourself feel big. I hate you. I would rather starve than work for you. That is your choice, I said. I hope you rot in that condo, she screamed. The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the hum of the disconnect tone. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of a cord finally being cut. For years, I had let them manipulate me. I had let them define the terms of my assistance. I had let them make me feel small for being big. But not today. My phone buzzed again. A text from Linda. You are dead to us until you apologize. You have broken your sister's heart. You are a cruel, heartless monster. Then another from Martin. Do not contact us until you are ready to act like family. I stared at the messages. The words were meant to wound, meant to trigger the old programming that said I was bad. I was wrong. I was selfish. But as I looked out at the shimmering heat rising off the pavement of Riverton, I didn't feel guilty. I felt lighter. I slipped the phone into my pocket. I smoothed down the front of my blazer. I checked my reflection in the glass one last time. Inside the boardroom, Victor Hale was waiting for the environmental remediation numbers. He needed facts. He needed logic. He needed someone who showed up and did the work. I walked back toward the meeting, my stride long and steady. I had a deal to close, and for the first time, I wasn't carrying the weight of 3 extra passengers on my back. 2 days before Christmas, the peace of my Riverton apartment was shattered not by carols, but by the relentless, angry buzzing of my intercom. I was in the kitchen, finishing a cup of tea and reviewing the final punch list for the marina project before the holiday break. The screen on the wall flickered to life, showing a distorted fisheye view of the lobby downstairs. There they were, the unholy trinity. Linda stood in the front, her jaw set in a line so hard it looked like it might snap. Martin was behind her, looking grim and burdened, as if he were carrying a cross rather than a winter coat. And Hazel stood to the side, wearing a new trench coat that I knew she could not afford. Her arms crossed, her face a mask of petulant fury. They had driven 6 hours to ambush me. I stared at the screen for a long moment. I could pretend I was not home. I could let them stand there until they got tired and left. But I knew my mother. She would stand in that lobby until the security guard called the police, and then she would make a scene that would end up on the evening news. I pressed the talk button. "I will buzz you up," I said, my voice flat. I unlocked the door and stood back, waiting. My apartment was my sanctuary. It was a minimalist space, all clean lines, neutral tones, and quiet. It was the one place where the chaos of my upbringing could not reach me. Until now. When the door opened, Linda marched in without a greeting. She walked straight to the dining table and slammed her handbag down on the glass surface. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "We need to talk," she announced. "Now," Martin followed, closing the door behind him with a heavy, final thud. He looked around the apartment, his eyes scanning the Italian leather sofa, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the abstract art on the walls. He did not look impressed. He looked disgusted. "You live like this," he said, shaking his head. It was not a question. It was an accusation. "Just you. In all this space." "Hello, Dad," I said, leaning against the kitchen island to keep my distance. "Merry Christmas." "Don't you dare," Linda snapped, spinning around to face me. "Don't you dare pretend this is a normal visit. We are here because what you did to your sister is unforgivable. It is cruel, and we are not leaving until you fix it." Hazel had walked over to the window and was looking out at the city view. Her back turned to me. She acted as if my presence was offensive to her, as if breathing the same air was a compromise of her principles. "I made her a job offer," I said calmly. "She declined it. I thought that was the end of the discussion." "A job offer!" Linda shrieked. Her voice was climbing to that pitch that used to make me hide in my closet as a child. "You offered her a mop, Brinley. You asked your sister, who has a university degree, to scrub your toilets. You tried to humiliate her. You tried to reduce her to a servant in your own house." "It is a property management role," I corrected. "It involves maintenance. It involves care. It is honest work. It is an insult." Hazel spun around, her eyes blazing. "You know exactly what you were doing. You wanted to see me on my knees. You wanted to be the big, rich sister giving orders to the poor. Pathetic failure. It makes you feel good, doesn't it?" "No, Hazel," I said. "It makes me feel tired. I offered you a salary of $55,000 a year. That is more than you have made in any year of your life. I offered you a place to live. I offered you stability. You are the one who decided that manual labor was beneath your dignity." Martin walked over to the sofa and sat down heavily, spreading his arms across the backrest as if he were presiding over a courtroom. "You have enough, Brinley," he said, his voice low and judgmental. "Look at this place. Look at your clothes. You have more than you need. Why are you so greedy? Why is it so hard for you to just share a little bit of your success without attaching strings to it? Why do you have to make her dance for her dinner?" "Because I danced for mine," I said. The anger that I had been suppressing for years began to rise, hot and sharp in my throat. "I didn't just wake up in a corner office. Dad, I worked for it." "Oh, stop it," Hazel scoffed, rolling her eyes. "We all know the story. St. Brainley and her hard work. You act like you are the only person who ever had a job." "I am the only person in this room who has kept one for more than a year," I shot back. "That is enough." Linda slammed her hand on the table again. "We are not here to talk about your resume. We are here to talk about your lack of empathy. Your sister is in crisis. She has debts. She has no home. And you are playing games. We expected better from you." "Why?" I asked. I pushed off the counter and took a step forward. "Why do you expect me to fix her mistakes? Why is her mortgage payment my emergency? Why is her credit card bill my moral failing?" "Because we are family," Martin roared. "Because we sacrificed everything for you." "You sacrificed for Hazel," I said. The words came out colder than I intended, but they were true. Let's be honest about history for a second. When I graduated, I lived in a studio apartment in Alabama that had mold in the bathroom. I ate ramen noodles for 2 years. I worked for free as an intern. Do you remember that? Did you visit me? Did you offer to pay my rent? "You never asked," Linda said defensively. "You were always so independent. You said you were fine." I said I was fine because every time I called home, all you talked about was Hazel. I said, "Hazel needed a car. Hazel needed a deposit for her apartment. Hazel needed therapy because her boss looked at her wrong. You bought her a brand new sedan when she was 24. I was driving a car with a taped-up window. You paid off her credit card debt 3 times. 3 times. Mom, you never paid a dime of my student loans." "Because you could handle it," Martin argued. "You were strong. Hazel is different. She is sensitive. She needs support. Why do you punish her for being different than you?" "I am not punishing her," I said. "I am refusing to enable her. There is a difference. You have spent 10 years cushioning her fall every time she trips, and now she thinks gravity doesn't apply to her. She thinks she can walk into a corporate office with no experience and demand a 6-figure salary just because she wants it." Hazel stepped forward, her face flushed. "You think you are so special," she spat. "You think you got into Harborstone because you are a genius. You got lucky, Brinley. You knew someone, or you were in the right place at the right time. Don't act like you are some self-made hero. You had help. You just don't want to admit it because it ruins your little narrative." I stared at her. The delusion was total. She actually believed that success was a lottery, and I had simply drawn the winning ticket while she drew the losing one. "I had no help," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I applied online. I went through 7 rounds of interviews. I studied until my eyes bled. I missed holidays. I missed birthdays. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a connection. I didn't have a daddy making phone calls for me like you did at that agency in Cedar Falls. I did it alone." "You are a liar," Hazel said. "You are selfish and you are a liar." "And you are a child," I said. "You are 30 years old and you are throwing a tantrum in my living room because I won't commit fraud to get you a job you cannot do." Linda gasped. "Fraud. How dare you use that word?" "It is fraud," I said, looking my mother in the eye. "If I tell my company that she is qualified when she is not, that is fraud. If I use my reputation to vouch for her work ethic when I know she cannot show up on time, that is fraud, and I will not lose my career to protect her ego." The room went silent. My parents looked at me as if I had slapped them. They were not used to this. They were used to me nodding, apologizing, and writing a check to make the peace. Linda picked up her bag. She clutched it to her chest like a shield. Her eyes were wet, but they were hard. "You have changed," she whispered. "Money has ruined you. It has turned your heart into stone." "No, Mom," I said. "Money just gave me the ability to say no." "One day," Linda said, her voice shaking with a prophetic menace, "you are going to crash. You are going to lose this job, or this apartment, or your health, and you are going to need family. You are going to reach out your hand, and we won't be there, because you pushed us away. Don't come crying to us when you are alone in this big cold box." I looked at them. I looked at my father, who was shaking his head in disgust. I looked at my sister, who was looking at me with pure hatred, and I realized that Linda was wrong. I wasn't pushing them away. They had left me a long time ago. They had left me the moment they decided I was the provider and Hazel was the beneficiary. "If that is what family means," I said slowly, measuring every word, "if family means I have to sacrifice my honor, my career, and my sanity to carry someone who refuses to walk, then I don't need it." Martin stood up. He adjusted his coat. "Come on, Linda. Hazel, we are leaving. There is nothing left here for us." They walked to the door. They did not look back. They did not say goodbye. Hazel was the last one out. She paused at the threshold and looked at me one last time. "I hope it was worth it," she said. "I hope your $5.7 million keeps you warm at night. It has excellent heating," I said. "Goodbye, Hazel." She slammed the door. The sound echoed through the apartment, vibrating in the empty space. I stood there for a long time. I listened to the silence settle back over the room. It was heavy, but it was peaceful. The buzzing of the intercom had stopped. The shouting had stopped. My hands were shaking slightly, a physical reaction to the adrenaline, but my mind was clear. The cord was cut. The tether that had dragged me behind them for 3 decades was finally severed. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street. I watched them walk out of the lobby and get into their car. I watched them drive away, merging into the traffic of strangers. I was alone. It was 2 days before Christmas, and I was completely alone. I turned away from the window and walked back to the kitchen. My tea was cold. I poured it down the sink. Then I opened the refrigerator and took out a bottle of chilled white wine. I poured a glass. I sat down on my Italian leather sofa. I looked at the abstract art on the wall. I took a sip of wine. "Merry Christmas, Brinley," I whispered to the quiet room. It was the best present I had ever given myself. The weeks that followed the Christmas ambush were defined by a silence so profound it felt physical. My phone, usually a source of anxiety, sat on my desk like a dormant volcano that had finally run out of magma. There were no texts from Linda accusing me of destroying the family. There were no voicemails from Martin lecturing me on moral obligation. There were no sporadic, passive-aggressive links from Hazel about toxic siblings or narcissistic abuse. For the first time in years, I woke up in the morning without a knot in my stomach. I went to the gym. I drank my coffee while watching the sunrise over the river. I went to work at Harborstone and focused entirely on the marina acquisition, which was moving into the branding phase. It was a piece I had paid for with a scorched earth policy, but as the days turned into weeks, I began to realize it was a bargain. Then came the Tuesday afternoon that tested whether I had truly severed the cord, or if I was just holding the scissors. I was in my office, reviewing a deck of logo concepts for the Solana Bay project. The sun was cutting through the glass walls, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. My desk phone rang. It was the internal line, but the caller ID displayed an external number I recognized immediately. Northbridge Creative Labs. Northbridge was the premier branding agency in the state. They were Harborstone's strategic partner for the Marina project. We were paying them nearly $500,000 to design the identity of our new development. Their reputation was sterling, and maintaining a good relationship with them was critical for my standing with Victor Hale. I picked up the handset. Brinley Hamilton. "Hi, Brinley. It is Lyra Vance over at Northbridge." The voice on the other end said, Lyra was their VP of Talent Acquisition. We had met a few times at industry mixers. She was sharp, professional, and did not make social calls during business hours. "Lyra," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Good to hear from you. Are we still on track for the presentation next Thursday? I know Victor is eager to see the mock-ups." "The presentation is all set," Lyra said. Her tone was polite, but there was a hesitation in it, a stiffness that set my internal alarms ringing. "Actually, I am calling about something else, a bit of a sensitive matter regarding a candidate application we received this morning." My stomach tightened. "Oh. We just opened a requisition for a senior communications manager," Lyra said. "It is a high-level role, $100,000 base salary, managing a team of 4. We received a resume from a Hazel Pierce." The name hung in the air between us, suspended by the invisible wire of the telephone connection. "I see," I said. My voice remained steady, but my hand gripped the phone cord. "She listed you as her primary reference," Lyra continued. "And not just a reference. In her cover letter, she explicitly stated that she is your sister and that you encouraged her to apply for this specific role to handle the Harborstone account." I closed my eyes. The audacity was breathtaking. Hazel had not just applied, she had weaponized my name. She was trying to leverage a relationship she had just destroyed to secure a job she was unqualified for, at a company I did business with. She was gambling that I would be too embarrassed to contradict her, or too afraid of family fallout to sabotage her. She also mentioned, Lyra added, her voice lowering slightly, that since our companies work so closely together, hiring her would ensure a seamless synergy between the development team and the creative team. She heavily implied that you would view her hiring as a personal favor. I felt a cold flush of anger rise up my neck. This was not just lying. This was professional extortion. Hazel was trading on my reputation. She was walking into my professional house with muddy shoes, assuming I would clean up the mess because we shared DNA. "Brinley," Lyra asked, "I wanted to call you directly before I moved her to the interview pile. We value our partnership with Harborstone. If this is someone you are vouching for, I want to give her a serious look, but I need to know if she is up for the task. This role requires managing a 6-figure budget and handling crisis communications. Does she have that experience?" This was the moment. The old Brinley, the one who sat at the Thanksgiving table and let her parents berate her, would have panicked. She might have offered a lukewarm endorsement, something vague like, "She is very creative," or "She is a quick learner," just to avoid the conflict. She would have tried to protect Hazel from the truth, even at the expense of her own credibility. But I looked at the file on my desk. I looked at the Marina blueprints. I thought about the years of 80-hour weeks I had invested to build a name that meant integrity. If I lied to Lyra, and Hazel got the job, the inevitable failure would not just be Hazel's, it would be mine. When Hazel missed a deadline, or insulted a client, or couldn't balance a budget, Northbridge would look at me and ask, "Why did you send us this person? Nepotism was a poison, and my sister was trying to inject it directly into my veins." "Lyra," I said. My voice was cool, detached, and stripped of any familial warmth. "I appreciate you calling me. I want to be very clear. Hazel Pierce is my sister. However, I did not encourage her to apply for this role, and I was not aware she was using my name as a reference." There was a pause on the other end. "I see. Regarding her qualifications," I continued, staring out at the Riverton skyline, "you asked about budget management and crisis communications. To my knowledge, her experience has been primarily in entry-level coordination roles and short-term freelance projects. She has a pattern of leaving positions abruptly. I cannot speak to her ability to manage a team or a budget of that size, as she has never held a role with those responsibilities." I took a breath. "If you are asking me for a professional recommendation based on merit, I cannot provide one for this specific level of seniority." It was the truth. It was the brutal, unvarnished truth. I did not slander her. I did not mention her tardiness or her entitlement. I simply matched her resume against the job requirements and found it wanting. "Okay," Lyra said. She sounded relieved. "That is very helpful. Brinley, honestly, her resume was a bit Sparse for the title, but given the family connection, we didn't want to dismiss it out of hand. I appreciate your candor. It saves us a lot of time. I trust this conversation will remain confidential, I said. Of course, Lyra said. We will handle it on our end. See you next Thursday. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking slightly. I had just killed my sister's job prospect. But deeper than the guilt was a fierce sense of protection, not for her, but for myself. I had protected my perimeter. 3 days passed. I assumed the matter was closed. Then, on Friday morning, an email from Lyra popped into my inbox. The subject line was simply FYI. I opened it. Hi, Brinley. I thought you should see this. We sent a standard rejection letter to Hazel yesterday. This was her response. We have flagged her in our internal system as do not hire for future reference. I am sorry you have to deal with this. Attached was a screenshot of an email chain. The rejection from Northbridge was standard corporate politeness. Thank you for your interest. We have decided to move forward with other candidates whose experience more closely matches our needs. Hazel's reply, sent at 2 a.m, was a manifesto of rage. To whom it may concern, I am shocked and appalled by this decision. It is clear that you did not actually review my file. I am Brinley Hamilton's sister. She is the senior director at Harborstone, your biggest client. Did you even check with her? She specifically told me to apply for this job. Refusing to interview me is a slap in the face to her and to your partnership. This feels like discrimination. I have more creativity in my little finger than your entire team. You are making a huge mistake. I will be speaking to my sister about this, and I doubt Harborstone will want to continue working with an agency that treats their family members with such disrespect. You will be hearing from us? Hazel Pierce. I read the email twice. The entitlement dripped from every pixel. She had not only lied about my endorsement, she had threatened my business partner with my authority. She had tried to wield power she did not have to bully a company into hiring her. If I had lied for her, if I had gotten her that interview, this is the behavior I would have unleashed on my colleagues. She would have been a liability from day one. I sat there, staring at the screen, realizing that my parents' coddling had created a monster. They had taught her that consequences were for other people. They had taught her that the rules of the world could be bent if you screamed loud enough. I hit forward. I typed Linda's email address in the recipient field. I did not write a long explanation. I did not write a defense of my actions. I wrote one sentence. This is the result of teaching Hazel that she deserves everything without having to earn anything. I hit send. I waited for the explosion. I expected my phone to melt within minutes. I expected Martin to call me a traitor. I expected Linda to send me photos of herself crying, but nothing happened. 1 hour passed, then 4, then a day. The silence from Willow Ridge was different this time. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of shock. There was no defense for that email. Even Linda, with her Olympic-level mental gymnastics, could not look at Hazel threatening a corporate partner and call it passion. It was unhinged. A week later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number from North Carolina. I answered it warily. Hello, Brinley. A soft, familiar voice spoke. It was my Aunt Eleanor, Linda's younger sister. Eleanor was the quiet one in the family, the one who usually sat in the corner at Thanksgiving and drank iced tea while Martin pontificated. Aunt Eleanor, I asked, surprised. Is everything okay? I am fine, honey, she said. Her voice was hushed, as if she were hiding in a closet. I wanted to call you. I was over at your parents' house yesterday for Sunday dinner. I assume I was the topic of conversation, I said dryly. Not exactly, Eleanor said. Brinley, it was awful. Your mother showed me the email you sent. She was trying to get me to agree that the company was rude to Hazel. She was trying to spin it. I am sure she was. But then Hazel came in, Eleanor continued. She started screaming at your father. She threw a vase. Brinley, a glass vase. She smashed it against the wall because Martin suggested that maybe she shouldn't have threatened to sue them. I felt a chill run down my spine. She threw a vase. She told them it was their fault, Eleanor whispered. She said, "You should have forced her to help me." You are her parents. Why can't you control her? She was berating them, Brinley, treating them like they were her servants. She said they were useless because they couldn't make you bend. I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. The monster was turning on its creators. Your mother just sat there and cried, Eleanor said. But I saw Martin's face. He looked scared. I think he is finally seeing it. He is seeing what happens when you never say no to a child. Why are you telling me this, Aunt Eleanor? I asked. Because I wanted you to know that you are right, she said firmly. I have watched this for 30 years. I watched them give her everything while you scraped by. I stayed quiet because it wasn't my place, but I'm not staying quiet anymore. You did the right thing. Brinley, someone in this family had to break the cycle. They don't want to hear it, but they need it. You are the only one living in reality. Tears pricked my eyes. Real tears. Not the frustration tears I usually shed over my family. It was the first time, the absolute first time, that a member of my family had validated my reality. Thank you, Eleanor, I choked out. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. You stay strong, she said. Don't let them drag you back in. Hazel is drowning, and she is trying to stand on your parents' heads to breathe. Don't let her stand on yours. We hung up. I sat in my office as the sun began to set over Riverton. The sky was a bruised purple, beautiful and vast. For weeks, I had wondered if I was too harsh. I had wondered if maybe, just maybe, I was the villain they painted me to be. But Lyra's email and Eleanor's call had given me the final piece of the puzzle. I wasn't the villain. I was the mirror. I was the only surface in their lives that reflected the truth back at them. And they hated me for it because the reflection was ugly. Hazel's application to Northbridge was her final test, and she had failed it spectacularly. She had proven that my refusal to hire her wasn't spite. It was prudence. She was a professional hazard. I turned back to my computer. I had a branding presentation to prepare for. I had a marina to build. I had a life to live. And for the first time, I realized that protecting that life wasn't selfish. It was survival, and I was going to survive. The intelligence reports came from Aunt Eleanor. Over the next 2 months, she became my conduit to a world I had exiled myself from. We spoke once a week, usually on Sunday evenings. Eleanor did not gossip for the sake of entertainment. She reported the facts with the grim precision of a war correspondent, documenting the collapse of a regime. Through her, I learned that the economic reality of the Hamilton household had finally crashed into the cliff face of my parents' denial. For years, Linda and Martin had projected an image of upper-middle-class stability. They drove nice cars. They kept the lawn manicured. They funded Hazel's lifestyle. But the truth, Eleanor revealed, was far more fragile. Their retirement funds were tied to fixed income accounts that were being eaten alive by inflation. Their mortgage, which they had refinanced twice to pay for Hazel's education and her various bailouts, was still looming over them. The cost of living in Willow Ridge had spiked, and without my silent contributions, the birthday checks, the holiday cash, the emergency transfers I used to make, they were bleeding money. The math simply stopped working. They could no longer afford to be Hazel's patrons. The promise they had made to her since she was a child, that she could always come home, that they would always catch her, had expired. It was not a moral awakening on their part. It was a mathematical necessity. Martin sat her down at the kitchen table last Tuesday, Eleanor told me during one call. He showed her the electric bill. He showed her the grocery receipts. He told her that unless she started contributing $1,500 a month to the household expenses, they would have to sell the house. I tried to imagine that conversation. I tried to imagine Hazel, who believed she was owed a 6-figure salary for existing, staring at an electric bill. How did she take it? I asked. She cried. Eleanor said. She accused them of betraying her. She said they were sounding just like you, but Martin didn't budge. I think he was too terrified of bankruptcy to indulge her feelings. And so, the free fall began. It was not a dramatic crash. It was a slow, humiliating slide into the mediocrity that Hazel had spent her entire life judging. First, she took a job as a barista at a chain coffee shop in downtown Willow Ridge. This was the same girl who used to complain that the foam on her cappuccino was too aerated. Now, she was wearing a green apron and cleaning milk steamers for $12 an hour. She lasted 3 weeks before quitting because her feet hurt. But when she came home, Martin refused to give her the Wi-Fi password until she paid her share of the bill. She went back out. She got a job as a sales associate at a boutique that sold overpriced linen clothing to tourists. She was fired after a month for arguing with a customer who wanted to return a dress. Then came the night shift at the supermarket, stocking shelves, scanning items. It was physically demanding. Repetitive work. It was the kind of work that required you to swallow your pride every single time you punched the clock. I watched this transformation from a distance, observing her digital footprint fade. The curated photos of brunch and sunsets disappeared from her social media. The inspirational quotes about knowing your worth and manifesting abundance vanished. In their place came silence. Long stretches of nothing, occasionally, late at night. She would post a vague status update, a black screen with small white text saying things like, "growing pains," or "the universe is testing me," but the aggressive glamour was gone. Linda's behavior changed too. Eleanor told me that my mother had stopped bringing Hazel up in conversation at the church potlucks or the bridge club. For years, Linda had acted as Hazel's publicist, spinning every unemployment stint as a sabbatical and every failed venture as a brave pivot. Now, when relatives asked what Hazel was doing, Linda would suddenly find something very interesting to examine on the buffet table. She was ashamed. Not of Hazel's jobs, there is no shame in honest work, but of the lie she had told herself. She had promised the world a prodigy, and she had delivered a shelf stalker. The cognitive dissonance was silencing her, but the most shocking revelation came from my father. "He came over to fix my leaky faucet yesterday," Eleanor said. "He looked older, Brinley, tired. He was talking about Hazel, about how hard she is finding the supermarket shifts." "Did he blame the supermarket?" I asked, expecting the usual script. "No," Eleanor said. "He stopped working, looked at me, and said, 'Elle, I think we made a mistake. I think we told her she was special so many times that she forgot she had to be competent.'" I sat in my office in Riverton, holding the phone, staring at the wall. It was the first time Martin Hamilton had ever admitted a flaw in his parenting strategy. It was a confession extracted by the brutal reality of an empty bank account. Eventually, the tension in my parents' house became untenable. Hazel could not afford the $1,500 they demanded, and they could not afford to feed her for free. 2 months after the Christmas showdown, Hazel moved out. She did not move into a luxury condo. She did not move into a trendy loft in the Arts District. She moved into a 3-bedroom apartment in the Ironwood District, a working-class neighborhood on the edge of Willow Ridge, known for its peeling paint and chain-link fences. She was sharing the unit with 2 other women, both in their early 20s, who worked double shifts at the local distribution center. Hazel Pierce, the girl who demanded a master suite and ocean views, was now sleeping in a 10-by-10 room with a window that looked out onto a dumpster. I did not feel happy about this. I did not pump my fist in the air or pop a bottle of champagne. I felt a cold, clinical detachment. It was like watching a physics experiment. If you remove the artificial supports from a structure that has no foundation, it collapses. Gravity is not malicious. It is just gravity. I was done trying to be the architect of her life. I was done trying to prop her up. I was just the observer now. While Hazel was learning how to budget for coin laundry, I was finalizing the details of my own reality. The Solana Bay condo was complete. I had hired an interior designer from Miami who specialized in minimalist coastal luxury. We spent weeks selecting the textures: cool marble for the kitchen island, reclaimed driftwood for the accent walls, linen drapery that billowed in the ocean breeze. I installed a security system that rivaled a bank vault biometric locks, cameras with facial recognition, and sensors on every window. I received the official keys on a Tuesday. I held the heavy brass key fob in my hand, feeling its weight. It was not just a piece of metal. It was a symbol of everything I had denied myself for a decade. It was the vacations I didn't take. It was the shoes I didn't buy. It was the sleep I didn't get. It was mine. I arranged for a private cleaning crew to do the final sweep. I set up the smart home system so I could control the thermostat from my phone. I was preparing to spend my first full weekend there, to finally uncork a bottle of wine on that wraparound balcony and listen to the ocean without a single voice in my ear telling me I was selfish. Then the email arrived. It was from Martin. The subject line was "Family Request." I knew, before I even opened it, that they had not learned the lesson. They had felt the pain. Yes, they had seen the reality. Yes, but the instinct to redistribute my success was hardwired into their DNA. I opened the email. Brinley, I know we haven't spoken much. Things here have been hard. Your mother is not sleeping well. I am writing to you about your sister. I know she has moved out. She is living in a terrible place. Brinley, it is not safe. The neighborhood is rough. She is working nights at the grocery store and she is exhausted. She has lost weight. She looks like a ghost. I know you are angry. I know we said things we shouldn't have, but I am asking you, father to daughter, to show some mercy. You have that place in Solana Bay. It is sitting empty most of the time. Hazel needs a break. She needs to reset. If you could just let her stay there for 3 or 4 months just until she gets her bearings, just until she can find a better job, it would save her. She wouldn't be in your way. She would just use one of the guest rooms. She has been humbled. Brinley, she has suffered enough. Please, be the bigger person. I read the email 3 times. She has suffered enough. To Martin. 3 months of living like a normal working-class adult was suffering. To him, facing the consequences of her own laziness was a tragedy that required a rescue mission. He wanted to move her from a gritty apartment in Willow Ridge directly into a $5.7 million oceanfront sanctuary. He wanted to bypass the work. He wanted to airlift her out of the valley and drop her on the mountain peak that I had climbed barefoot. If I said yes, I knew exactly what would happen. 3 or 4 months would turn into a year. The guest room would become her territory. My sanctuary would become her frat house. The smell of the ocean would be replaced by the smell of her entitlement. But more importantly, if I said yes, I would be robbing her of the only valuable thing she currently possessed, the bottom. She had hit the bottom. That was good. The bottom is solid. You can build on the bottom. But if I put a pillow under her now, she would never learn how to stand up. I hit reply. Dad, I understand that seeing Hazel struggle is painful for you. However, the condo in Solana Bay is my primary residence and my private sanctuary. It is not a vacation rental, and it is not a halfway house. Hazel is 30 years old. Living with roommates and working an entry-level job is not a tragedy. It is a reality for millions of people. It is how character is built. If I intervene now, I render the last few months meaningless. My home is not available, not for a month, not for a night. I hope she finds her footing. But she has to find it on her own ground. Brinley, I sent the email. I looked at the key fob on my desk. The brass glinted in the sunlight. I realized then that this was not over. An email would not stop them. They were desperate. They were watching their golden child rust, and they would do anything to polish her up again, even if it meant breaking into my vault. They viewed my boundaries as suggestions. They viewed my no as a starting price for a negotiation. I needed to do more than just say no. I needed to demonstrate, physically and irrevocably, that my life was a closed circuit. I picked up my phone and called the interior designer. I need to make a change to the guest list for the housewarming, I said. Actually, I need to make a change to the access protocol. I want the security team to have a specific flagged list, names that are permanently barred from entry. Of course, Ms. Hamilton, the designer said. Who are we flagging? Linda Hamilton, Martin Hamilton, Hazel Pierce. I said the names out loud. And the sky didn't fall. The earth didn't open up. I will pass that to the concierge, she said. I hung up. The boundary was no longer just a concept in my head. It was a directive in a security server. They were going to try again. I could feel it. They would not accept that the door was locked until they threw themselves against it and bruised their shoulders. "Bring it on," I whispered. I closed my laptop. I had a condo to visit. And for the first time, I was going to walk through the door knowing that the only ghosts inside were the ones I chose to invite. I sent the email on a Tuesday morning. I kept the language deliberately vague, a bait woven from the very hope that had kept their delusion alive for decades. I wrote that I wanted to invite Linda, Martin, and Hazel to the Solana Bay condo for a weekend meeting to discuss the future of Hazel's employment and the financial stability of the family once and for all. They took the bait. Of course they did. To Hazel. This email was an admission of defeat. In her mind, I had finally cracked under the pressure of guilt and was ready to hand over the keys to the kingdom. She likely envisioned a corner office at Harborstone, or at the very least, a plush title managing the communications for my new property. To my parents, it was a victory lap. They told Aunt Eleanor that I had finally remembered my roots, that the cold corporate robot had thawed into a dutiful daughter. They arrived at the Solana Bay complex at 2 p.m. on Saturday. I watched them from the security feed in my living room. As they walked into the lobby, their posture changed. The Solana Bay lobby was a cathedral of wealth. The floors were Italian marble that cost more per square foot than my parents' entire house. The ceiling soared 30 feet high, dripping with modern crystal chandeliers. The air smelled of white tea and money. I saw Hazel look around, her eyes wide, drinking it in. She was not looking at the architecture with appreciation. She was looking at it with hunger. She was already mentally moving her furniture in. She smoothed down her dress, a designer knockoff she had likely charged to a maxed-out credit card, and smirked at the concierge when he buzzed them up. When they stepped off the private elevator directly into my foyer, the performance began. "Oh, Brinley," Linda said, stepping into the open-concept living room. Her voice was breathless. She dropped her bag on a bench and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Atlantic Ocean in a panoramic masterpiece. It is breathtaking. You really have done well for yourself." Martin followed, looking at the minimalist furniture, the art pieces, the sheer scale of the space. "A bit excessive for one person, don't you think?" he muttered, though his hand lingered on the leather back of a sofa. "But I suppose if you have it, you might as well flaunt it." Hazel did not speak to me. She walked past me as if I were the doorman. She went straight to the balcony door, opened it, and stepped out into the salty air. She leaned over the railing, looking down at the infinity pool below. I could see the calculation in her shoulders. She was picking out which lounge chair would be hers. "Please," I said, gesturing to the dining table. "Sit down. We have a lot to get through." I had arranged the table like a boardroom. There were 3 leather-bound folders placed at 3 seats. Next to my seat was my tablet, connected wirelessly to the large flat-screen television mounted on the far wall. They sat. Hazel took the seat directly across from me. She looked smug. She looked like a woman who had survived a siege and was now waiting for her reparations. "So," Hazel said, flipping her hair back, "I am glad you finally came to your senses. I was telling Mom on the drive down that I am willing to forgive the whole Northbridge mess if the offer is right. I am thinking something in brand strategy. I have some ideas for this place. Actually, you need a stronger social media presence." I did not smile. I did not nod. I opened my own folder. "We are not here to talk about brand strategy," I said. "We are here to conduct a formal interview for the only position I am offering, the position of Solana Bay residence caretaker." Hazel let out a short, sharp laugh. "Okay, very funny. You made your point with the maid joke back in December. Now let's talk about the real job." "This is the real job," I said. My voice was level, devoid of any sarcasm. "Open the folder. Hazel." She hesitated, her smile faltering. She flipped open the leather cover. Inside was a 20-page employment contract, drafted by one of the top labor lawyers in the state. "This is a legal agreement," I explained, looking at my parents. "It outlines the duties of the caretaker: managing the maintenance schedule, coordinating with the professional cleaning crews, performing daily spot checks and light cleaning when vendors are not present, monitoring the security systems, watering the plants, stocking the refrigerator before my arrival. It is a full-time, live-in position. The salary is $55,000 a year, plus full medical and dental benefits. Linda slammed her hand on the table. Brinley, enough. We drove 6 hours thinking you were going to apologize and offer your sister a career. And you sit here and offer her a mop again. Do you enjoy humiliating her? Is that what this is? A power trip. It is not a power trip. Mom, it is an employment offer, I said. Hazel is currently working night shifts at a grocery store for $15 an hour. She is living in a neighborhood she hates. This offer doubles her income. It provides her with free housing in a luxury building. It gives her health insurance. It is a lifeline. It is menial labor, Martin shouted, his face turning red. Your sister has a degree. She is not a servant. She is not too good for work, I countered. And right now, her degree is not paying her bills. Hazel was staring at the contract, her face pale. I am not signing this, she whispered. I am not going to be your housekeeper. Brinley, I am a marketing professional. I deserve a management role. I deserve respect. You want respect? I asked. Respect is earned. It is not inherited. I have earned it, Hazel yelled. I have worked hard, but people like you keep blocking me. You sabotaged me at Northbridge. You told them lies about me so they wouldn't hire me. You are the reason I am struggling. I looked at her. The victimhood was so deep, it was practically structural. She truly believed I was the villain of her story. I didn't sabotage you, I said. I protected myself. I tapped the screen of my tablet. The 65-inch television on the wall flickered to life. Displayed in high definition was the email chain between Hazel and Northbridge Creative Labs. The room went silent. What is this? Linda whispered, squinting at the screen. This, I said, pointing to the TV, is the email your daughter sent to one of my most important business partners after they declined to interview her. Read it. I scrolled down so they could see the text clearly. The threats, the accusations of discrimination, the way she invoked my name as a weapon, the promise of a lawsuit. You told them you would sue them, I said, looking at Hazel. You told them that I, your sister, would pull Harborstone's business if they didn't hire you. You tried to blackmail a multi-million-dollar agency using authority you do not have. Hazel shrank back in her chair. I was angry, she stammered. They were disrespectful. They didn't know who I was. They knew exactly who you were, I said. They knew you as a liability. I swiped to the next image. It was the internal note from Lyra, the HR director. Do not hire under any circumstances. Unprofessional conduct. Potential legal risk. If I had lied for you, I said, my voice rising for the first time. If I had used my capital to get you that job, this is what you would have done. You would have exploded the moment someone told you no. You would have dragged my reputation into the mud with you. You think family means I have to help you. Family does not mean I have to let you destroy the career I spent 10 years building. Martin looked at the screen, then at Hazel. He looked deflated. For the first time, the evidence of her behavior was not something he could wave away as spirit or passion. It was black and white text on a 4K screen. She made a mistake, Martin mumbled, though his heart wasn't in it. She was under a lot of stress. You can't hold one email against her forever. I am not holding it against her, I said. I am using it as data. This is why she cannot work at Harborstone. This is why she cannot work in marketing. She does not have the temperament for it. But she can do this. I tapped the contract on the table. This job, I said, is completely within her control. It is a checklist. It is private. It is safe. If she does the work, she gets the life. She gets the ocean view. She gets the pool. She gets the salary. But she has to actually do the work. I looked directly at Hazel. Her eyes were wet, but they were burning with hate. This is it, Hazel, I said softly. This is the only offer. There is no secret management job waiting in the wings. There is no check coming to pay off your debts. There is this contract. It is a real job, in a place you claim you want to be. If you are ready to work, pick up the pen. If you are only interested in the title, then you can leave. You are a monster, Hazel hissed. You are a manipulative, jealous monster. You set this whole thing up just to shame me. Do you have another offer? I asked. What? Do you have another job offer? I repeated. Do you have anyone else offering you $55,000 a year and a rent-free apartment on the beach? Do you have anyone else lining up to save you? Hazel opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at Linda. She looked at Martin. She was waiting for them to jump in, to promise to sell the house, to promise to fix it. But they sat there, silent. They knew the bank account was empty. They knew they had nothing left to give. I hate you, Hazel whispered. That is fine, I said. You don't have to like your boss. You just have to do the job. Linda stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the marble floor. She was shaking. We are leaving, she said. Her voice was brittle glass. Come on, Martin. Come on, Hazel. We are not staying here to be insulted. She looked at me with a look that I knew was meant to be a death sentence. If you let us walk out that door, Brinley, you are done. Do you hear me? We are done. No more holidays. No more calls. You will be dead to us. Is that what you want? To be an orphan with a full bank account? I looked at them. I looked at the three people who had defined my worth by my utility for 30 years. I looked at the parents who had watched me drown in work while they taught my sister how to float. If family is just a ticket you use to cross boundaries, I said, my voice steady and final. If it is just a weapon you use to drag me down whenever Hazel sinks, then yes, I will cut the cord myself. I reached into my own folder and pulled out a white envelope. I slid it across the table toward Martin. What is this? He asked, eyeing it suspiciously. That is a deed of trust, I said. I have set up a small annuity for you and Mom. It will pay out a fixed monthly amount enough to cover your groceries and your utilities. It goes directly to your account. It is not enough to support a third adult. It is for you. That is my contribution. That is me making sure you don't starve. I stood up. This is the last time we will talk about money, I said. I have done my part. The rest is up to you. Hazel stared at the contract one last time, for a second, just a fraction of a second. I saw her hand twitch toward the pen. I saw the reality of her life at the grocery store war with her pride. But pride won. It always won with her. She shoved the folder off the table. It hit the floor with a loud slap, the papers fanning out across the marble. I would rather live in a gutter than work for you, she spat. She grabbed her purse and marched toward the door. Martin looked at the envelope in front of him. He didn't push it away. He picked it up and slid it into his jacket pocket. He didn't look at me. He just turned and followed Hazel. Linda was the last to go. She stood there, clutching her handbag, looking at me with a mixture of fury and terrified realization. She realized that the threat of cutting me off was empty because I was the one holding the scissors. You will be lonely, she said. It is cold at the top, Brinley. It is peaceful, I replied. She turned and walked out. The heavy front door clicked shut. The electronic lock engaged with a decisive beep. I stood there in the silence. It was not the heavy, suffocating silence of the Thanksgiving dinner. It was the expansive, airy silence of a room that finally had enough oxygen. I looked at the contract scattered on the floor. I looked at the empty chairs. I walked over to the mess. I bent down and picked up the papers. I stacked them neatly. I did not feel sad. I felt lighter, as if I had just set down a backpack filled with stones that I'd been carrying since I was 6 years old. I walked to the balcony door and slid it open. The sound of the ocean rushed in the rhythmic, eternal crashing of waves against the shore. I stepped out onto the wraparound terrace. The sun was beginning to set, painting the Florida sky in streaks of violet and burning orange. I walked to the railing and looked down. I saw 3 small figures exit the building. I saw them get into their aging sedan. I saw them drive away, merging into the traffic, heading back north, back to the cold, back to the consequences they had tried so hard to outrun. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. A notification from Linda. You have destroyed this family. A notification from Hazel. I hope you die alone. I looked at the screen. Then, I swiped down and tapped the icon for Do Not Disturb. I placed the phone face down on the patio table. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed with the layout of a new acquisition deal, a historic hotel in Savannah that needed saving. I took a deep breath of the salt air. I was Brinley Hamilton. I was 33 years old. I owned this view. And for the first time in my life, the only expectations I had to meet were my own. I started to type. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on whether I made the right choice. Don't forget to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like the video, and smash that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.